What's going on, Workforce? Brian here, and today we're diving into your comments regarding our ranking videos. Both Chris and I sat down and made our own ranking videos, one based off of the DPS of the jobs, I think about a month ago or so, and Chris followed it up with his opinion piece on what job is best. And if you haven't seen his piece, honestly, it's probably one of the best videos we've ever made on this channel. Truly incredible. But what I wanted to do today is dive into your comments about what you guys had to say about the rankings, because obviously there's a lot of really good stuff here. Honestly, it was some of the best conversations that we've had. Somebody posted like that the video was a failure because it's getting a 50% like to dislike ratio. And just to address that on the top, honestly, any discussion video that I produce, that's the percentage that I'm shooting for, because it means that we're bringing in people who don't just honestly agree with everything I say. I don't want that as a part of this community. And obviously, I think it'd be easier if everybody just agreed on everything, but then life would be very boring as a result. So I was really happy to see the like to dislike ratio for that video. If you like this video, be sure to like it. If you don't, be sure to dislike it. Honestly, it doesn't hurt anything. It really helps us out either way. Engagement is engagement, and I'll take it. So thank you guys for your likes and your dislikes in that regards. But let's go ahead and dive into your comments today and see what you guys had to say about our rankings, our power rankings video for Final Fantasy XIV. So Lewis Sayers kicks it off here saying, I think it is potentially quite damaging to newer or less informed members of the community. I worry for most people who do not understand the nuance behind the jobs, who might view this, it's not clear or maybe a little redundant if you watch the video, but And so I wanted to bring up Lewis's comment first because he's 100% correct. Honestly, typically as a part of our guides and our general message here is really play what you want to play. Raw DPS and parsing isn't really where it's at, right? That's one of the really strengths I think Final Fantasy XIV brings to the overall, game itself. Now you can feel free to disagree with me, but we have to have the conversation of utility. We have to have the conversation of what's fun to play, because when everybody's starting out and what they're, trying to like, hey, what should I play? Really, the answer is what are you going to enjoy the most? Because we see this all the time. The meta the meta is just the meta itself, and it's broken all the time because people end up playing what they want to play and working hard to master that thing. Just because somebody is really good at Black Mage doesn't necessarily translate that you might be good at Black Mage just because of its number. Same thing kind of applies to Monk. What's really cool since the video, obviously we've seen with gear and everything, the numbers increase. Black Mage and Monk have gone up another 2,000. They're like at 15k max parse right now for damage, and that's just, it's beautiful to see. And then those numbers are going to keep changing, so we will be updating it. But on the same side, the thing that I did mess up on, and I do want to make sure that going forward, especially as rankings are related, is to iterate that fact. Play what you want to play. These are just raw numbers. And on that same note, based off of a lot of the conversations that I've had, is that people, there's a theme, and we're going to dive into a couple, comments here in a minute, talking about utility, and then ultimately how do we rank that. I'm going to save that conversation for those comments because it's really, there's a lot of things that I'm thinking about, and I'd like to know your feedback on, so we'll go ahead and dive into those here just in a second. But our next comment comes from Matt Johnson. And this is a really good comment. Like, he put together a really impressive written statement. So we ended up pinning that just so people could give it a read because it's very, very thoughtful. But I'm just going to touch on the top part of it. He says, I'm going to be blunt on this one. This is a very badly done video. One, power to me does not equal DPS and HPS. To me, power suggests the overall power level. This includes damage, support, debuffs, and buffs. And since this is purely numbers list, it does not account for any of the support or utility that you should have titled the video DPS HPS ranking instead. So I honestly, that's not a bad idea for a title of the video. Traditionally, we typically don't retitle videos. We don't, and he concluded at one point, I don't know if he removed that from his comment as it was edited, but originally said you should delete this video. And it's like, and we don't delete videos unless for some reason the upload failed and we have to re-upload it. That's pretty much the exception to the rule. We don't delete videos. I think it's should show growth. I think you should be willing to stand by what you say. And I completely stand by that video. It's based off of, as stated in the video, the DPS numbers. That's what we've had. And the question that I had to the community is, how do you rate utility? And nobody could give me a real answer. And so that's what we've been working on behind the scenes. How do we rate utility? And so right now, when we go look at the jobs, when we go look at the clear rates for Savage and Eden and various things, what we're starting to see is an interesting picture of party composition. And that's going to be something we're going to use to try to bring into the discussion. And so as a part of the document, there's a couple of things that people have suggested. And one is that we could use the document to show the rankings off the pure DPS numbers, because people find that interesting, and that's the goal of the video. And at the same time have a second category within the same document to rank the utility and rank the jobs based off of the utility that they bring to the party comp as well. And so you could actually see that, like, okay, maybe ninja is lower here, but maybe it's higher on utility, or maybe, you know, this is ranking high on DPS, but as a black mage on utility, it's not really bringing anything to the party, so it ranks really low there. So trying to give a better, you know, understanding of that. So we have to play around with that, and that's one thing I'd be interested to see what you guys think of from a rankings video going forward. The other side of it is people suggested doing it purely by the different roles, so DPS, tank, and healer all like within the same document, same kind of rules apply, that I can put, you know, one ABC, you know, kind of in those different groupings, so we can kind of see that clearer. So like a DPS like monk and black mage and dragoon, they don't have to share with the healer or the tank as a part of their tier, so thus you could have more space to kind of wiggle it around. So that's kind of what we're toying around with. Let me know which one you guys might prefer as we go forward for ranking. Just as a preview, we're not planning on doing this like every week, obviously, but as each patches roll out, as adjustments come, as we are obviously expecting some adjustments to come with patch 5.1, we feel like that might be the best opportunity to do something like that at that time. So that's kind of what we're kind of working on behind the scenes to try to get a clearer picture, because again, like this tied into Lewis's perspective, this is just ranking. This has no and should have no real say on it. I think it's just informational, and it's just fun. I enjoy ranking videos. A lot of people seem to enjoy ranking videos, and the response on our ranking videos has been phenomenal. So yeah, we're going to keep doing those. So then Jonah follows it up, says, you should do another video like this, but instead of ranking it strictly on the DPS and heals per second, that you could do it on what they contribute overall. And honestly, this is kind of like what I was kind of hinting at earlier, you know, how we're looking at party comp. But yeah, I think even FF Logs has updated it, so we can kind of see kind of normalized numbers now and kind of get a better picture of where these jobs fall in ranking. But then you bring up the conversation about heals per second, and so did so did Matt earlier. So the question for heals per second is actually really interesting. How do we rank the healers? Because obviously, if you don't want to be overhealing, you can have a high HPS, and if you're overhealing, that's going to be overall bad for it, because that's MP that you could have used for damage, that's MP that you could have used for healing when needed, so you don't find yourself low on healing. But one of the things that's interesting about it is that we'll have to kind of play around with it, because shielding also kind of accounts to it. The thing that we're seeing right now for the big clears for party comps, the majority of everybody's taking a white mage and a scholar. Obviously, we've talked about the issues with astrologian. Astrologians themselves are feeling, you know, flustered, and we'll probably see if we see some adjustments. They've made some patches and some improvements to the overall casting times, and so I've been interested to see how the numbers kind of all come together. But it's still, you know, that's part of the process. And for me, I'm personally hoping for more things to see with with Summoner. Having played Machinist, it really just for me blows Summoner out of the water. But that's not to say, you know, that everybody's disappointed with like every adjustment that the jobs make. It just says that ultimately we'll have to see where we go from here. So ranking is always going to be like interesting. From y'all have it pretty much hit the nail on the head when it comes to like healers, because we don't want to be overhealing. And so if we can go and try to get and make sure we have that parsed information, that would be something we can easily factor in. But when we go look at just the party comps right now, it is Scholar and it is White Mage for the majority of them. I've seen a few Astrologians as a part of the like top rank clear groups, but not that many at the moment. Now, maybe my data, you know, is slightly off. I've only been looking at the Eden and Eden Savage stuff. It could be different maybe in the dungeons, so we'll have to go and still compile that data. But we're still a little while away, because we're going to wait to see what happens with 5.1 and what adjustments are made before we do another ranking list. So Zoila writes, I think this list is extremely flawed, but it's not your fault. Currently, FF Logs does not have the ability to track DPS contribution from support skills. For example, when I cleared Titiana Extreme, my Dancer parsed it over 12k DPS, more than likely the least 1k of the Black Mage's DPS, if not more. Could this be attributed to my buffs? Also, HPS is a poor metric because both Scholar and White Mage have mechanics that will generate a lot of overheal. Given that their overall lowered tiered jobs have support and don't expect them to improve much because it seems by design. if a job with support is a pure DPS bringing the same total DPS, then you never take the pure DPS. I believe this is their thinking here. So a couple of things. Obviously, I want to jump into the... I've seen a lot of people do some insane like parses and individually, like where maybe they weren't uploading it to the FF logs, so their numbers were coming in much higher than the overall average that we've seen, obviously being parsed. And it's like, ideally, yes, there's going to be some people that are outliers there. From the perspective of, where you're having the lots of overheal, we talked about that just a little bit ago in this video. And given that the overall tier jobs for the support, you don't expect them to improve much on that, because essentially there's obviously a conversation in the community about what is better. And if you guys haven't been following along, it's where, like, if a job doesn't have utility, which people wanted like Samurai and Black Mage to have some form of utility, they feel like that would overall better the job. However, the damage they bring is their utility. The question when it comes into put into practice is that if you're working very hard for that damage and somebody with utility is able to easily keep up with you, well, then I think like a Black Mage or Samurai or, damage needs to be brought up. Dragoon brings its own utility in the form of increasing everybody's overall DPS. But in that regards, that's kind of where these adjustments will be made. When you see, like, if Samurai or Black Mage is being out DPS'd, they're probably going to increase the Samurai and Black Mage's overall DPS. Usually the game and the designers tend to lean into more buffs than nerfs, though we do see a nerf from time to time. A Black Mage and a Samurai, they bring all the utility that they need, and that's the form of their output. And the overall thing here, there's a couple points that I kind of want to dive into, is that whenever, like, how do we value utility, right? How is it valued? And it really depends on what type of, what your goals are. So like we say Red Mage, Summoner, those bring a lot of utility when you need those raises. Those bring a lot of utility in that case. Summoner can also do a party-wide damage reduction, buff, which can be handy in times. So what's interesting about that is that as soon as you don't need those raises, those jobs, that their utility loses value. And because essentially if you go to farm, you want it as fast as clear as possible, and thus the most amount of DPS as possible is what it is. And if no one is dying, you don't need to do any kind of resurrections in the game. You don't need to raise anybody in the game. Then you don't need that utility, and you would rather have the overall DPS, because that means you can finish the content sooner. And so that's kind of where utility is this interesting kind of moving pendulum. If you're in progression, absolutely. If you're in farm, not so much. Again, it's overall important to note that you should play whatever job you want to play. That's the strength of the game. They don't design content that basically excludes you, maybe with an adjustment or two to the jobs that they're kind of always playing around with. But I don't think that, when it comes to the jobs that are pure DPS jobs, that they need utility, because the damage they bring is their utility to it. And that's just a preference on it. I don't want to see Black Mage have a raise spell. I don't want to see Samurai or that. Now, personally, I would always love to see like Phoenix Downs as an option for every player to use. I wish those things stacked, but I get why we don't have that option. I'd love to see Paladin have a raise. They used to have a raise. It'd be great if it's still, that raise would come back, but that's just my personal take on the overall situation. And I don't necessarily see that happening anytime soon. And our final comment comes from Daniel. Although it's not a bad video, FF Logs is an absolute joke. Almost every single primal I've slaughtered, that I'm the top gunbreaker on gunbreaker, and yet to be on the list is something isn't working properly. And so, to conclude with my kind of final thought on the overall video itself, is that I don't think, FF Logs is a joke. I find fault and I'm frustrated that we don't have that kind of information in the game. Now, I might be kind of a fringe kind of person here, but I love statistics. I don't think and I'd never want to see this stuff real time, but to be able to not access this information in game, to be able to not let the game provide utility rankings, to be able to kind of gamify the system. People, bring up the idea that, parsing is toxic, right? And I think it can be. I think essentially a person is toxic, and then they're using a tool which can, benefit the community and using it as a weapon. They're weaponizing data in this regards. I don't agree with that. But I think when we start establishing that when people are doing that, as opposed to not having the data whatsoever, it's not fair, because essentially we have a situation in 14 where we have the haves and the have-nots. And that is that we have people who have the data and the numbers, and and it's teaching them, it's making them better. And then we have the have-nots who don't have the data, and that's where then all of a sudden we start seeing friction. So they're worried about like introducing these systems into the game and that causing drama, whereas the drama exists and we're basically telling people that they need to get off PlayStation to be able to do this, or team up with a friend so that they can have some kind of information on how they need to improve. I think the person that there's a real positive, silver linings here, is that if someone's asking their friend to parse for them, that means they're actively interested in trying to master their job, master their rotation, to be able to improve. Again, I don't think this should be ever real time. I think at the end of dungeons, I think at the end of the content you run, the game should be able to provide you the statistics for that, to tell you and compare you to you. And that's where I think the difference is that we have stone, sky, and sea. And it's really good to go out there as a good practice to kind of set your mind right, to test your rotations, to try and improve. But it just takes a little bit sometimes. Like, people are like, can we get a Hall of the Intermediate or a Hall of the Advanced? And I don't think either of those things would apply, because it still says, hey, like, maybe you should go try and do these things. And those things aren't geared for that kind of content. I think at the end of the day, the game needs to include the information and the statistics like we have in PvP. And I wish in PvP they'd improve upon it, that you would have more statistics, more rankings, more of that, so you can kind of build that out and see how you're improving, where you could improve, and how you could go from there. It's really good that the community has responded with tools for the community to start using to be able to try and do that. But it's unfortunate when we have that situation with haves and have-nots. But that's just my personal take on it. I don't use DPS numbers to beat people up. I use DPS numbers to try and make myself better. And it's not just about DPS. But if that's all we have to go off of, that's what we go off of. I think if 14 was able to introduce the ability to do some kind of utility ranking, like, hey, by the way, because we are the game, we track this, like, here's how your buff increased the overall group DPS. I think when you focus, when you take it away from individual performance and return it to group performance, you end up having a better overall mindset. And it's why we've kind of always preached that when things go wrong, don't point the finger at other people, point the finger at yourself. Ask yourself, how could I improve? How can I improve? How can I improve in that situation? Rather than say, like, he stood in bad. Like, oh, could I have rescued him from that bad? Or, oh, could I, how can I improve so that overall, like, he's we're communicating better. And that's the difference, obviously, between pugs and statics, and that's the difference between various different personality types. I'm not going to sit here and say it's always going to be pretty, and I'm not going to say that these solutions are going to solve issues with toxicity and issues with just how different players and different personalities interact. That's well beyond my pay grade at this moment. But for the most part, I think it is a system in which that if FF logs is a absolute joke, like Daniel says, well, I mean, it's, we're all kind of having to try and figure out this information for ourselves. And if the game did it for us, if the game provided this information for us, then we wouldn't need systems like that. Or we could use those systems and make them better to provide the things that people are looking for. And it's honestly just raw facts and raw numbers at the end of the day. Anyway, those are my thoughts for this community feedback. Guys, thank you all so much for your wonderful comments. I love reading them. Thanks also for your perspective, whether you thought the video was good or not. Honestly, I really always enjoy engaging with you, and hopefully you enjoy these videos as well. If you did, hopefully you hit the like button in this case, but also you're welcome to hit the dislike button as well. If you guys aren't part of the workforce, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, we have a link in the description for our Casually Hardcore podcast highlights channel. We'd love for you to go check it out. Hit that subscribe button over there and enjoy the content that we have coming up with various guests talking about all things related to video games. We've got a couple of things that I'm very excited to share on that channel here in the near future. But anyway, for Work to Game, thanks so much for watching this video. Hope you have a fantastic day. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.